Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am here today with Alexandra Beller. Welcome, Alexandra. So, she is a choreographer, director, and somatic educator whose work spans over 25 years in dance, theater, and creative mentorship. She's a former company member with the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company and the founder of Alexandra Beller Dances. She now teaches internationally and supports artists in building brave, embodied, and sustainable creative practices. She's also the author of two forthcoming books. Two. Wow. The Embodied Conductor and The Anatomy of Art, Unlocking the Creative Process for Theater and Dance, a deeply honest guide for navigating artistic life with curiosity, rigor, and self-trust. And I have to warn you guys, she is amazing at language. That's incredible. So please welcome Alexandra Beller.
Thanks so much
Welcome.
for having me, Karen.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So can you talk a little bit? So you were always in theater and dance, right?
I was always in dance, and then I crossfaded into theater.
And did you kind of talk a little bit about your early journey and the transitions that you made along the way, if you could?
Yeah, a lot of transitions, a lot of switching lanes. I started off as a dancer, and as you said, I danced with Bill T. Jones for 7 years and had the opportunity to tour the world as a performer, which was amazing and hard. And I
Mm-hmm.
started really craving creating my own work during that time. So when I left the company in 2001, I pretty much right away started my own dance theater company. And in my own work, I've always been a hybrid of speaking and moving. But I was not a highly trained theater artist. I was really came to theater through dance quite organically and intuitively. And then over the years, just scaffolded that practice with more rigor and education around theater. Inside that, I was teaching some somatics and a lot of dance, and then started to teach choreographers, more choreography, and was teaching in and out of academia. And I felt like I needed a little more structure to my teaching practice. So I got my MFA and I got a degree called a CMA, Certified Movement Analyst, which is a practice called Laban and Bartenieff, and it's analyzing the human body towards meaning. And that really brought me into both theater and healing work, somatic healing work. So now I still teach dance. I teach lots of practices for theater makers and dance makers. I work one-on-one with clients on their recovery and voice building and expressivity and efficiency. And I choreograph for theater.
So I've as you talk about, I haven't heard of the Laban. What would you say, Laban what?
Movement analysis.
Oh, okay, Laban. I haven't heard of Laban before. How would you compare that? Because I know you're going to know this because you've done theater and dance. How would you compare that to like Gabrielle Roth?
Oh, such a totally different Gabrielle
Okay.
Roth.
Yeah, tell me more.
More, 5 rhythms, ecstatic dance, authentic movement. Gaga, I would say, have like a world together. Essentially, they're ways of initiating movement in the body towards freer and more authentic expression. In their own ways, each of those does that. Laban is quite a scientific, rigorous system for analyzing human movement. So he wanted to create a notation system similar to music notation. And so a composer can write a music score and then,
Anybody can reproduce it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and we can
Yeah.
reproduce it hundreds of years later. Choreographer makes it dance and good luck. Hopefully people remember it. This was,
Yeah.
of course, before the advent of video. Now we can videotape it. But in creating the notation system, he had to analyze all the different aspects of human movement. What body part is doing what action with what quality and what direction in space for what reason. And that became a formula for being able to read meaning in the body. And some of it became the field of nonverbal communication. Some of it became child psychology. Some of it became a lot of work that we do in theater. There are tons of applications for the work. So I got my degree in that, and that really led me into theater in a more profound way.
I would imagine. First of all, it sounds incredibly comprehensive. I don't even know. I'm a little bit I can't even imagine how somebody could do all that. But it also sounds very analytical from somebody who's from a very somatic kind of feeling, background. So how did you parlaying into that and really it's like somebody who was a painter going in to learn how to do acupuncture and memorizing the meridians and all the interactions between them. How did you make that transition?
It's exactly why I needed the work, is that I was so intuitive and feeling and enteric, and I don't know why, but this is this is what I want to do. And it was beautiful, and I really appreciated it, and I still have all of that, and I still appreciate it about myself. And if it did not feel recreatable, repeatable, it didn't feel nuanced, it didn't feel scientifically scaffolded. And I really wanted that kind of rigor underneath it. And I wanted the ability to feel a little more in control of my intuition. So I really needed something analytical and scientific because I felt like very well versed at the other. And I think sometimes we bias towards, the type that we are. There's nothing wrong with that either. I think investing in your strengths has, a lot of depth to it. And I talk about that in one of my books. And for me, I needed something the opposite.
Right, right. I have to go look this up now because that's really fascinating. So as you work one-on-one with people now, so are you mainly doing theater work with people? Are you doing dance? Are you a combination? Are you doing somatic? Are you doing Laban? How are you normally working with people now? And to achieve what?
Yes, is the answer to I have a really diverse range of people that come to me for what I used to call mentorship, and now is like just this very big bucket. I have one person who identifies as autistic adult, and he is trying to get more authentic and efficient in his body, but he really uses it to connect to his own whole healing practice, both physical, neurological, and emotional, spiritual healing. So we do what many people would describe as dance movement therapy, that I can't legally call movement therapy because I'm not a DMT license, but essentially we're doing movement therapy together. I have a woman who works in disability activism who is refining her pedagogy, and I'm helping her analyze her teaching towards an integrated population of wheelchair users and amputees and visually, auditory impaired humans who are artists and performers. I work with people on rehabilitation from injury, like professional dancers who are trying to get back on stage. I work with people on helping them figure out what kind of career they are trying to shift towards, how to make their whole career life feel more authentic and aligned with their values. I'm working on somebody on his book about somatics. So it's like really I'm helping you map you towards what you are trying to do. I'm really not trying to guide anybody in any particular direction that I see for them, but I'm trying to reflect back. They'll come in with a goal. They've sought me out for a reason. And then we light that goal and use it as a GPS.
It seems like you're really like balanced between the intellectual and the physical, which is, like I know that a lot of people have a preconceived notion of dancers as people who aren't that interested in intellectual stuff. So I love it that you've kind of like grounded it, right? You moved on and yet grounded where you came from.
Yeah. And that stereotype, as I'm sure you are saying, is, is BS.
It's ridiculous.
Dancers are often some of the most intellectual, intelligent humans I've met. They're political, they know science and anatomy and physics, and they're well read. So actually most dancers that I've worked with are like wildly intellectual. I totally agree with you. That is fairly common stereotype. I don't think I actually am moving against the grain very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, when people see somebody who performs and that's their main thing, they think that's the one
Yeah,
dimension to the person.
totally. Yeah,
Ridiculous.
that is our
Huh.
habit. We like to
Yeah,
reduce.
right. As humans. So I'm really interested in what gave you the audacity to say, I'm going to make my living as a dancer. That's how I'm going to step out in the world. Like, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, that's really amazing.
Well, sometimes students at universities will come to me and say something like, "Do you think that I should be a dancer professionally?" And tongue in cheek, I say no, because if you have to ask the question, you shouldn't do it. It's way too hard a career if you have any choice in the matter. So I would love to claim the audacious title, but I feel like I didn't really have a choice. It just felt like it had chosen me, not to be cliche about it, but it really did. It felt like my only option. And pretty much everybody that I encountered professionally, teachers in college, namely, said, you shouldn't go for this as a career because I didn't have the body type, that felt like it was going to be conducive to getting a job. And so I felt when I was entering that professional life that I probably had no shot at what we would call making it in the dance world. And I was like, whatever, I will survive. I'll have a waitressing job. I'll survive. When it becomes more painful than it is joyful, I'll switch into something else. And I always assumed I'd go back to school for like physical therapy or psychology or something like that. And then 9 months later, I was in one of the biggest dance companies in the country and made my living at it for 7 years. I feel like in some ways, slightly more audacious was my switch to being a choreographer because that career it was obviously, like a sinkhole, a financial sinkhole.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Really?
has only gotten worse, over the last 25 years since I made that choice, 3 years. And then I think, also maybe audacious was when I switched from being, a private instructor in a movement form called Gyrotonic, which is like akin to Pilates. It was like I was a Pilates teacher.
Is it one of those things that has the oh my God, I've seen those. Those are crazy.
Yeah, they're great. So I was doing that to support my choreographic career, and I had a choice I was working at a studio and, not getting paid a great rate because of course, they did a lot of the client management and then took half the fee. And I was like, either I need to commit to this and like buy the equipment and rent a space and really go for this, or I need to do what I really want to do, which is be a dance teacher full time. And I decided to go for that. So that one was actually the one that felt scary. And the other one that felt scary was switching from running my company to being a theater choreographer.
And what's the timeline for those two compared to each other?
I really left Gyrotonic, teaching Gyrotonic in like 2005 and committed to being a dance teacher full time. In 2006, uh, I went and got my MFA at a low residency program so I could feel like a better dance teacher. And in 2015, I really switched lanes into being a theater choreographer.
Okay. So when you were a dance instructor, did you have your own studio? Are you working out of a studio? Are you renting space?
In New York, you don't really have your own studio. You teach for other people. And then I have always been um, in academia in some way. I've never wanted a full-time, like tenure track academic position because there's too many other things that I want to do. But I taught at Princeton for 7 years and I've taught at a lot of different places for like extended periods of time. Um, as an adjunct or a part-time teacher. And right now, what I really love is that I mainly just hop around as a guest. And I love that age group. Love I love a lot of things about academia. Of course, there are things that all of us around academia hate, but I also love a lot of the just intellectual like fertility of inside academia and the excitement and the optimism that many departments have. So I'm delighted that now I just kind of hop from department to department, often not for even a full semester, so I don't have to do any grading. I just like come in, have this beautiful exchange with them and pop off, and then that really works for me.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, there's something about minds that are hungry to learn and grow that makes such a really just a great canvas for an incredible experience.
Yeah, and like breaking some cycles around abuse and trauma as a teacher is healing for me. Like to be able to teach in the way that I wish I'd been taught is a like beautiful healing practice for me. Teaching them about consent and agency and authenticity at 18, 19 years old. Such a gift that I kind of had to create and wrap and unwrap myself.
Right.
Hi, it's Karen. I wanted to remind you guys to go to secondwindwomen.com/community offers to see all the offers from our guests for free meetups, discounts on products, consults, etc. So do check that out, and don't forget that we are here to support you. We can help you with Google ads, websites, Facebook and Instagram ads, Google reviews. There's so many digital ways we can support your business, and we're happy to help. Just reach out to me and my team.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about breaking the cycles of trauma and abuse and how you kind of balance it? Because you're going into very psychological spaces, right? But you're doing it. So I have many friends who studied somatic therapy, and I'm just curious how the dance movement therapy is different.
It's not necessarily different. I would call it a type of somatic therapy. So somatic therapy is just going to be any therapy that brings the body-mind relationship into the driver's seat. I would say a lot of somatic therapies are physical, but the slider between body-mind leans a little more towards mind. Something like Alexandra technique or Feldenkrais somatic experiencing are things where you're definitely checking in with the body, which I love. And there's usually some kind of movement, which I love. I really use full dance movement, improvisation as some of the main tools that I'm going to use. And that doesn't mean you have to be a dancer, right? Like anybody can move
Right.
in a full way. And that also doesn't mean that everything I do involves dance. Like there are definitely times when we're sitting and talking or rolling around or lying in fetal curl for like a long time. There are a lot of different ways that we might find the way into the body. But a lot of somatic practices begin more in stillness and are about like letting the body seek sensation. And I'm more about getting the body into movement and seeing what kind of story the body is starting to tell in movement, not just in, okay, I can feel that this is living in my gut, or I can feel this at the back of my neck, which is wonderful work, not denigrating any of it.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, oh, when you're moving, your right side wants to move more than your left. Let's see what happens if we go to that point where the left side is more resistant and see what's in there. Let's start to move from exactly that fissure between movement and stillness in that left side body where it's not wanting to move as much, so I'm looking for places where the body is starting to tell a story. The mind has not yet been able to really hear it. And from the outside, I have this vantage of being able to see it, which the mover can't see. So while I and most somatic practitioners would agree, absolutely believe that the human in front of you, your client, student, whatever, is in charge and knows best in so many ways. Their body, their sensation, their life, their trauma, etc. They know. I will never know. And I have this one thing that they don't have, which is this perspective from the outside. And I can see what they're doing in a way that they can't. Even in a mirror or in a video, they're never going to be able to see this like fairly objective view of them. So I have that resource that they don't have, and then I can help like feed that back into all the things they have. And together we collaborate on like, what is this story that your body's telling? Where's that from? What's it trying to say? How could we hear more of it? And to try to have a conversation with the body from the outside and then from the inside, where we really put the body in the driver's seat and we just see where it goes and we follow along.
It's like instead of working from right to left, you're working from left to right. And I feel like part of the beauty of that is that it's so easy, I find, for people to talk themselves out of what they think they feel, right? If you're starting up here, there's too much noise, right? Whereas if you're starting from a non-mental place and then moving into a mental place, you have a direct line in.
Yeah, and I love the way you put that, what they think they feel. Like, that's exactly it, right? I think I feel, that's not a feeling. Already,
Yes.
we're right in thought. So that was such a perfect phrase for that. Yeah, not what you think you feel. What do you feel?
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's let it move and let the feelings actually dance. And let's watch the dance. And there's a story being told by that dance.
And then figuring out what that story is, because I think it's a lot easier to go that direction than to have, in your mind where you can come up with reasons and counter reasons. And yeah, it's it's a complicated place for sure. So you mentioned something about theater choreography. How is that different than dance choreography?
Well, so many things are different. I mean, the architecture of the whole system is different, right? Theater, there's a director. In a more dance context, the choreographer is the director. Automatically, I'm not the director. So I'm not in charge. I'm really working towards somebody else's vision. Director has a vision, and I'm trying to bring the body to meet that vision. So already structurally, that's a big difference. Actors and dancers are very different to relate to. So that's a big difference. The kind of language, approach, phrasing, pacing, words I use, etc., is really different, actors and dancers. With dancers, I was always trying to bring in their why. Why are you doing this? Because dancers are conditioned to do what somebody tells them to do with their body and not necessarily question it, and of course, not all dancers. And not all dance companies and plenty of choreographers are giving you a why. And it is a conditioning of like, just do this. And you're like, okay, I just did that. What's next?
Yeah.
Actors are so conditioned. Well, why? Why am I saying it? Why say it that way? Why do it? So I was always trying to bring dancers into their why. And then in some ways, I'm trying to bring actors out of at least their intellectual why. So with dancers, I'm like, let's sit and talk about this for a while before we do it. And with actors, I'm like, let's do this 10 times before we talk about it. So often actors will be like, why is this? And which foot? And I'm like, let's just try it 5 times without thinking, as long as it's safe,
Right.
Obviously, if they need to know leverage things or things to keep their body safe, I'm going to do that. But other than safety precautions, I often don't like to talk to actors first. I often like to just bring them into the body. And often all of the questions that they were asking me beforehand, they're like, yeah, I see. I felt that. Yeah. When there's a character on one side of the stage and you're on the other side of the stage and you keep doing this phrase and you keep hitting this like kind of invisible wall and you get closer, but you have to keep going back to where you started. If they asked me why, I could give them a reason, but once they've done it really even once, they're like, I'll feel that.
You said, and speaking of that, you said you've done intimacy direction?
That is my newest endeavor. I've been training towards intimacy direction, which is a role that has come up more of late, especially since Me Too flourished, where in theater and film and television, they'll often hire someone called an intimacy director or intimacy coordinator for film and TV. And that's a person whose job it is to create the safest possible environment for risk. And that risk is sometimes doing content that's a little more sexual or intimate, but it could also be violent. It could just be emotional or touch trauma, racialized material, violent material, etc. So sometimes it's about the language we're using about it. Sometimes it's actually choreographing a kiss or a sex scene, or some intimacy directors are also fight choreographers, which I'm not, who can actually choreograph, you'll do this and then you have the sound of it, the nap,
Right.
there. And so they're choreographing a fight, and that's work that I don't do and don't really want to do. But a lot of it is around finding each performer's true, I don't love the word consent, but that's the word that we're using right now. True consent, real buy-in and collaborative engagement in something that is a little more high risk.
And that's how you create safety in those spaces with those tools.
Yeah. And so there are a lot of tools around finding your feeling about the moment, building the moment together collaboratively, and finding the mechanism inside you where you can locate your no if it comes up. Because a lot of us also are so trained out of having a no that from the embodied place, we don't even know where to find it, and it does not arise in real time when we need it. So many of our stories that involve trauma around wishing that we had said no to something and the shame of having not felt the agency or autonomy to say no in the moment. They're because we didn't have the phrasing for no that was fast enough. Like we hadn't practiced how to find the no, where to seek it, how to at least take a moment to figure out whether we needed more time, And so I'm trying to also teach actors and dancers, choreographers, directors, etc., how to find their own and how to engage their space in which each person in their space has access to their own tempo. Everybody's tempo is going to be different. around consent. And so to be able to be like, I'm sensing I have discomfort here, I at least know this means I need a pause. I need a pause. And then you have a series of things that you go through, and I help people find what their series of things are. There's not like just a formula for it, right? Everybody's going to have their own little, ecosystem of feelings where they're like, okay, I need to, some people need to do it more intellectually. Some people need to do it more somatically or physically. Some people need to do it more relationally, socially. And then an intimacy director in the field will also help the whole team make sure that the chain of communication to be able to advocate for your needs is always clear to everybody, is working efficiently, and is like not corrupted.
So how do you build trust in a situation like that where you're walking in and people don't know you and you're orchestrating this kind of sensitive, you know, for lack of a better word, situation, right? How do you build trust for that?
It's the main question in the room, and different will require different ways of building trust. But I would say the biggest picture that I would walk in with, or the smallest container for that answer that I would walk into, I think every space is we're going to collaborate on it together. We're going to talk about the needs of the show, the needs of each performer, the resources of each performer in terms of like, I know that I'm not going to be able to XYZ. I'm not going to be able to find my trust or whatever if it goes this way. I know that I need this. And it's also a matter of creating channels for communication with me that allow each person to have real access to themselves and this relationship. So some people like, I'm not in public on the first day in the circle going to be able to tell you all my access needs, but I'm going to make sure that they can email me, they can text me, they can fill out a Google form, they can fill out something anonymous, right? And so like all the different ways to meet different people's access needs and trying to let that become an ecosystem of the room. So I think that's like the smallest container. And then, of course, there are a lot of more specific things and games and exercises that we would play in one situation or another.
So you're like a mix between a manager and an emotional concierge.
Yeah, and a choreographer. Because,
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes you are like, okay, so what if their hand goes here? Great. And, how does it, like, what is the timing going to be like for this? And then where are you going to put your, like we're really choreographing sometimes. And then sometimes it's more facilitation. But a lot of times you are like really choreographing material.
Yeah, as somebody who's not in that world, I don't ever really think about that. But it makes sense, especially if you're trying to create a really safe space for people to have this what could be a very intimate experience, right?
Yeah. So you think about like the play Spring Awakening, the musical Spring Awakening, and sometimes like even a high school, certainly colleges have chosen to do it. And there's a scene that like has like dubious interpretations. There is a sex scene between two teenagers, and there is like mixed interpretations about whether or not it's like fully consensual for the female. And so you're talking about two, at best, like 19, 20-year-olds, but maybe two, like 16-year-olds doing this scene in a way that the audience is going to recognize what's happening. Like they need help. They deserve help with boundaries and, safety and advocacy.
Yeah. That reminds me of like, as an adult, when I've gone back and watched movies, I'm a little older. I've watched some of the movies I've watched and I was like, Grease? What? Oh my God. Pretty in Pink?
No, terrible.
All the stuff that we've.
Yeah, terrible. Things that didn't age well. And that's already in the writing. And then there's like the stories that we hear where like, okay, the scene itself is okay in that one. But then you hear stories years later where the actress is like, yeah, the director and the lead, they bullied me into this and I felt so uncomfortable and it really became a trauma for me. And, they didn't tell me I was going to be naked. Or, we hear words.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that.
Female presenting actors, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a fascinating dip into a whole world that I didn't even really know existed. I think I may have known that it existed for like porn, but I didn't know existed for, regular theater at all.
And it's becoming more and more of a thing. They just ran an article about it in the Times, I think, a couple months ago. And yeah, so it's becoming more and more of a known thing. And I think, to kind of backtrack to your question a little bit, I do think that the next generation of actors is starting to really appreciate having an ID or an IC on call or in the room.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you talked about how you didn't choose dance, you felt like that was your only choice, that these people who'd become actresses not only had to fight to get to where they were, but every day on set they'd have to fight to maintain who they were
Yeah.
in the container of this persona and this scenario. Wow, that's really thought-provoking. So tell me about, let's start with your first book. Tell me about, because you have 2 books out,
Yeah.
right?
So I have a book that I have spent, by the time it's released this coming June, it will have been a decade. Now that's on and off, right?
You're not old enough to have a book that's been out a
My
decade.
birthday is tomorrow and I'm turning 53.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I spent a decade writing it on and off. And, during COVID, I think there was probably a good year and a half off. So, it's not 10 years of writing, but that's my real baby.
And what's the title of that one?
The Anatomy of Art, Unlocking the Creative Process for Theater and Dance. And it's a voluminous book with a lot of different parts to it. There are 12 topics: time, space, meaning, relationship, environment, facts, faith, process, material, communication, context and culture, and priorities. So each one of those is like a chapter, and each chapter has an essay, a personal story from my own creative practice about how that topic was really instrumental for me, a set of tips, an embodiment exercise, a creative exercise, a score, about 50 questions to ask yourself in the studio, writing prompts, framework, and exercise. So it's like workbook and essay and a little bit of memoir. I try not to get too heavy on the me-ness in it. And at first I thought like, oh yeah, it's like a choreography workbook. And then at a certain point I was like, you're kind of writing a self-help book. And then finally I was like, yeah, those are the same thing. Like if artists are going to become the best artists they can be, if they're going to find their real voice, if they're going to be the bravest artists they can be, they need to heal. And so inside this, I'm talking about your inner critic and your relationship with feedback and how to create community and how to know when to work harder and how to know when to rest more and how to find joy in your process. And then, plenty of technical things, but I don't really believe in choreographic skills that are completely tangible. Like, if you want this feeling, you should put it on a diagonal. And if you want this feeling, and this is how you make a duet. And there are plenty of choreography books that go like very heavy on skills, but they feel like skills that are towards specific work. Like it feels like it's already narrowed in on an aesthetic and an outcome. And I want this to be for every performing artist or creative artist who makes performance work. And that includes people who are doing like really out there avant-garde stuff and people who are doing really commercial glossy stuff. And I want them both to feel welcomed into the book. And so I'm not trying to get your work to look like anything except for you, but I'm trying to help you map yourself and then map these things that feel a little bit more objective, like time has a certain kind of objectivity to it, right? There's durational time, there's sensed time, there's chronological time, and these are things that you may or may not have considered in your work. So I am bringing up these like facets of art that all of us at some point in our process are going to have let go of one or more of them. And I remember getting feedback for my own work from a mentor that I had, Anne Bogart, who's a famous theater director. And she was like, so, tell me what you both want from each other in your relationship right now. And we were like, yeah, well, because, I don't know. We don't know. And she's like, yeah, that's the problem. So any artist at any point needs reminders, no matter how advanced and seasoned you are, to be like, oh, yeah, I haven't thought about that aspect of it, or I just made an assumption about this or that. So that's that book. And then
that sounds like very much like a very expanded version of what you were talking about asking dancers why they're doing what they're doing and telling actors to lean into the movements and then pull back, right? to balance it out with the intellect. It sounds really comprehensive. How big is that book?
I finally got it down to 90,000 words. So it's going to be about, I think, 350 pages. Yeah. I was working in an app, a writing app, that like separated chapters and I couldn't quite get a word count. And I was like, I'm sure it'll be fine. And I had already signed this contract with Bloomsbury for a 90,000 word book. And then, of course, that app didn't interface with Bloomsbury in the right way. So I had to download it to another thing. Finally got the word count for the whole book. I was just about to hand in my full draft and it was 121,000 words. So I had to cut out 31,000 words from the book. It was such an intense slashing. It's so much better for it. It's such a better book.
Editing is hard.
It's really hard, but the book is so much stronger for having cut out 31,000 words. But that was a thing.
And you mentioned that I don't know if you call them chapters, but each section had a score in it. What do you mean by that?
So a score in this context, and people have a few different contexts for scores, is basically, the recipes that they give them in the Great British Baking Show towards the end of the season when they're like, so make a brioche dough, and they don't really tell you how to do it. And maybe that's a bad example because they're not trying to get the same product out of it.
I mean, they never do end up getting the same product in the British baking.
The goal of getting the same product at the end of a score. A score is a list of ingredients to create a piece of performance, a piece of work. So I might say create a phrase that you build through the process of accumulation, then take out all repetition. So, person's going to approach that from their own way and the vocabulary they use is going to be theirs, but they have a task. It's a set of tasks. And the reason for a set of tasks is that our innate creativity is as problem solvers, right? So if you look at a baby solving a problem, that's their creativity. And that's our most intuitive form of creativity is problem solving. But then we go into this empty room or face a blank screen or an empty notebook and we're like, be creative. And it's like the creativity needs to come from this different place. So to give somebody a set of tasks or in a way obstacles or problems to solve, I think starts to spark their innate creativity. And it gives them something to do where they don't have to come up with the very first idea, but they can solve a problem. Right. Learn 30 seconds of dance from a famous historic work and describe it in text. And then forgetting about that dance entirely, choreograph from the description you wrote. So lots of...
Like telephone with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and those are just like random examples of something I might say in a score. But essentially a score is a list of ingredients or tasks that you have to follow. And it's actually more like, I guess I like cooking shows, but like maybe it's Top Chef or something where they give you the basket and you're like, you have to use every ingredient in this basket and make 3 meals from it, right? An appetizer, an entree, and a dessert from whatever's in this basket. Essentially, what's in the basket is the score.
I mean, what you're saying is something that's really often overlooked, how valuable obstacles are. Everybody thinks that they want a life without obstacles. That's like the idea of, I don't know if you've heard about the people who say, well, if you lived forever, how boring would that be? Because you'd have nothing on the line. That's really fascinating. Cool. Okay, now tell me about your second book. I got to go buy your book.
The second book is more of a textbook and it's more niche, if you can imagine being more niche than that book. It's for conductors, music conductors, and it is teaching the system that I was talking about before, Laban Bartenia, to conductors to invite them more into their embodiment as a way to make choices about conducting. So you would imagine that conductors are these very embodied creatures. And I think most of the conductors that we witness, at least like on film and video, are these like astronomically talented, famous, masterful genius conductors. And they are very embodied. But most conductors really don't get taught embodiment as part of their process. It's like music theory, and, then programming and pedagogy, and classroom management. And they really don't get taught, like, where do you feel the music in your body? How does that come out in gesture? How do your gestures get read by other bodies? Where's the animal in this exchange? And there's a score, a music score on the podium, and there's a set of live musicians here in front of you, and there's, in performance at least, the set of live audience behind you, and your body is the conduit between this object that's not physical and their bodies and their bodies. And your body is the only thing at play in much of the time. Of course, you do speaking to your musicians during rehearsal, and you do writing when you're building programming, but for the most part, you are a physical creature and often not getting trained in a physical way. So this book is trying to fill that little gap, and I'm co-authoring it with a conducting,
I thought possibly you were. Yeah, no, it really like the value of cross-disciplinary studies, but I think that's like kind of your whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cross-disciplinary. Wow, that's really, I did know a woman who was a conductor, and she was very, very, very intellectual.
Yes.
Like super, super smart.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't call her particularly more embodied than anybody else, but I could see that there would be a huge value to that, just in the effectiveness, how they do their performance, right?
Yeah.
And their communication to the orchestra.
Yeah, and also how they're talking about music, how they're teaching is all also potentially embodied, because you're also trying to get these humans to embody the music through their instrument in a certain way. And conductors, at least, who are working in maybe non-professional situations like band directors and things like that, as in high schools and middle schools, which is the lion's share of conductors are not working with symphonies. There's like one per town, but at every middle school, high school, university, you're going to have one or more of these band directors and conductors. So a lot of what they do is also really coaching musicians on their practice of making music, which is a physical practice.
Wow. Such cool stuff. I'm blown away, Alexandra. Just blown away. So how can people find you, your books, everything?
Everything's pretty hubbed on my website, alexandrabellerdances.org. And yeah, there's going to be a book website soon, but it'll be linked from that website as well. So I think that pretty much hubs to everything. At this point, I'm about to have 4 websites, but that one serves as a tree.
Yeah, that's your entry point. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks
This
for
was
having me.
amazing to talk with you. You're so eloquent, and I just love your cross-pollination of ideas, and you're so informed and heartfelt.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope to see you again soon.
Me too.
Bye.
Wow, that was so much fun. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll see you next time on Second Wind Women. Let's make your second wind the strongest yet. Thanks.